Hello everybody and welcome back to 89 Games in our continuing guide series on the Gloomhaven characters. Today we're going to be talking about the Triangle or Triforce character. So, to avoid spoilers, you can click away now, but for everyone else, we're going to go ahead and get started in 3, 2, 1, here we go. Alright everybody, today we are talking about the Elementalist. Now the Elementalist is probably the hardest character to cover in this type of format in a video, just because there are so many elements being used and being activated to be used, and a lot of his cards have to be kind of played one after the other. You'll see what we mean when we get to the cards, but basically you need to plan out at least 2 turns ahead, maybe 3 or 4, to really make use of the Elementalist. So let's go ahead and jump over to the cards. We'll start talking about those. And then once we get done with level 1, I'm going to go over kind of my level 1 build and basically every single turn before your first rest to just give you an idea of how you want to kind of plan out your turns. And then from there, when you get to your next play cycle after the rest, you can kind of modify as you need to based on what cards you've lost, so forth and so on. And then as we add cards when we level up and such, you'll just kind of have to figure out how they can fit into the pattern, but they do fit. There is a way to use them, and we'll talk about a few specific strategies once we get to level 9. But let's go ahead and, like I said, talk about those cards. So Withdrawal Enhancement is our first card here. It's an attack 1, range 3, consume fire, consume air to add +2 attack. For each one of those you're able to consume, you get 1 experience if you use the fire. So that becomes an attack 5 at range 3, which is really powerful. And then the bottom is a move 3. You can consume ice and grass to add +2 move. And the ice specifically will give you an experience point if you're able to consume it. So as you can see, this right here is the theme of the Elementalist. You're gonna want elements, lots of elements, to make the most out of his cards. So it is not recommended that you play the Elementalist if you are in a small party. You probably only really want to use the Elementalist if you're in a full party of 4 characters, and those other characters are creating at least 1 or 2 elements fairly consistently for you that they aren't necessarily using themselves. I know that sounds a little complicated, and sometimes other players are going to want to use those, but there's also a lot of communication that needs to happen if you're playing the Elementalist to make sure that other players know, hey, I need this element or that element. Can you activate this or that for me? Let's move on. Pure Augmentation is essentially the same card, except the elements are reversed. So you got your grass and ice on the top instead of the bottom for your attack, and then the wind and fire on the bottom for your move. So again, it's essentially the same card, just the elements are in a different spot. So both of these can be powerful, especially at level 1, but it can be very hard to get those 2 elements that you need at the same time if, again, you don't have help. So then moving on to Formless Power, this one is an attack 2, range 2. You can consume any element twice. The first time gives you +1 attack and +1 range. If you can do it a second time, you get an additional +1 attack and range. So this can be potentially attack 4 with range 4. Not bad, but there are better cards that actually beat this one out later on. The bottom of this one, though, is an active card that's going to allow you during each of your attack actions to consume any element to add +1 to the entire attack action. Now, early on at lower levels, and depending again on the team you have and how many elements are getting activated, this is probably not going to be something you're going to want to use too much, because it's going to be hard to consume extra elements because you're barely going to be getting what you actually need in the first place. However, if you do have a team where just 3 or 4 elements are getting activated all the time, then obviously this is a great addition if you're always going to be able to use it. So then moving on to Shaping the Ether, this one is an attack 1, range 3, you gain an experience point, and then depending on what you consume, you can add several different effects to it. So fire is +2 attack, ice is a stun, wind is a push 3, and grass is a target 2. So if you power this up, I personally like to power this up with fire, ice, and grass, and you can do that on turn 1, and we'll talk about how we do that here in a little bit. But if you do that, this essentially becomes an attack 3, range 3 stun on 2 targets. And that is extremely powerful when you can get that to happen. And I like to do this early on, and it helps clear the first room. So again, a really powerful one if you can get these effects, these elements activated. And then the bottom, at the end of each of your turns, you may generate an element, but you deduct 1 from all of your attacks. So this is the card to play, this active effect on the bottom here, if you're having an issue with elements. Maybe you're in a team that they're not creating a lot of elements for you and you have to do most of it yourself. Then this helps you at the end of your turn. You can always create one element, and then whatever cards you played will hopefully create another one that you need, so you can almost always have two elements, which will make you a lot more powerful in the long run as the Elementalist. Granted, you will have -1 to your attacks, but being able to power up the attack and get the boost is still better than this -1. So for instance, if we go back up to pure augmentation, it's attack 1, and then with 2 elements, it's attack 5. So if you're losing -1 to make sure you got 2 elements to use, then you're still getting an attack 4 where you would have only had an attack 3 if you only had one of these elements. So it does make sense if you need it. However, if you don't need it, you definitely don't want to use it. You don't want to nerf your own attack power if you don't have to. And then moving on now to Stoking Hail. Stoking Hail is a range 2, or rather an attack 2, range 2, consume ice to stun, gain 1 XP. The bottom is a move 2, create fire. So the top of this one is a really, really good one to pair with a card that creates ice on the previous turn. So for instance, the bottom of Infernal Vortex, we'll get to it, is a move 2, creates ice. So you do that on turn 1, say, and then turn 2, you can play the top of this one and get the stun. So this is a repeatable attack that does damage. At range 3, it stuns. It's really good if you can get that ice to use it. And then the bottom is good because it activates fire, which again, we need those elements. So any of these move cards, they're only move 2s, but they create an element, are gold for the Elementalist. You don't want to give them up very often. So then we'll move on to Tremulent Cyclone. This one is an attack 1, range 3 in that triangle pattern. If you have wind to consume, it's going to give you +1 attack and a +1 push, gain 1 XP. So if there are a lot of traps or something around, this actually could be really good for doing a lot of extra damage to enemies. But I generally didn't find myself using this one too much personally when I played the Elementalist. And then the bottom of this one, though, is another move 2, this time creating grass. So we're going to hang on to this card for a long time just for that bottom. And then moving on to Infernal Vortex, we have attack 4, target all enemies at exactly range 2, consume fire and wind, or rather create fire and wind, and gain 1 XP is a burn card. So this sounds good. I mean, it's attack 4, but it's very specific. The enemies have to be at exactly range 2. Not within range 2. They can't be range 1 and 2. They have to be at range 2, and then you can target all enemies at range 2. So this could hit 4, 5, 6 enemies, but more than likely it's going to be hard to do that, and you're only going to be hitting maybe 2, maybe 3 with it. So it's really not that good of a burn, even creating those 2 elements. Early on, if you really need the elements, it might be a good idea if you're setting up a really good move for the next turn. But generally, this one's really not that good because of that very specific range. And then the bottom, though, is another one of our good move 2s, this time creating ice, which we need for stunning, like we talked about back up on Stoking Hail. Okay, so moving on to Lava Eruption. Lava Eruption is attack 1. It targets all enemies within range 4, creates grass and fire, 1 XP, and it burns. So this one, in my opinion, is a little bit better than Infernal Vortex. And that is because this one is going to hit everything within range 4, which is a lot bigger area than things specifically at range 2. Use a power potion or later on a major power potion with this card. That gets you up to attack 2 or attack 3. And then that's not bad. You think an attack 3 on an entire room, basically, that's pretty good. Especially if you throw in some advantage with some strength in there or eagle eye goggles. That's a pretty good move. So I do like Lava Eruption's top, and it is part of our plan later on here. And then the bottom is a move 2, creates wind. This is also one of our lowest initiative cards. This one in Infernal Vortex, we're going to see a lot of our cards are middling with the Elementalist. There are not a lot of good low or high initiative numbers, which kind of makes it hard to plan around having elements sometimes from our party. So we have to make sure our party is going early if we need those elements. So then moving on to Ice Spikes next. Ice Spikes is an attack 1, range 3, consume fire to make it attack 2, and wound with 1 XP in that triangle pattern. This one's a really good one early on just because, 2 attack on potentially 3 enemies, but wounding them all as well. It's actually pretty good. And then the bottom of this one is an attack 5, range 3, immobilize, creates ice, grass, and 1 XP. So, that's a pretty decent range attack, but it is a burn, and I really wouldn't use this attack for a burn. There are better burns that we can do if we're going to burn a card. And then moving on to Frigid Torrent, our last level 1 card is an attack 3, consume grass to target 2 with Pierce 2, gain 1 XP. Now this is a melee attack, and I play the Elementalist as a ranged character. There is possibly a melee build to be found in there, but with the Elementalist you have low health. You only have that 6 health starting at level 1, so it can be really hard to try and play this as a melee character, and I wouldn't really recommend it, but there are cards out there that use melee, so there is a build out there. However, we're going to be focusing on more of a ranged build. So continuing on to the bottom, this one, speaking of ranged, it is an attack 3 at range 3, pull 2 with creating ice and wind. It is a burn though, so if you got some traps to pull things over, then this could be really good. It could be worth the burn if you can do, 12, 15 damage with it combined with the traps. But otherwise, it's again another one you probably don't want to burn. And then finally moving into the X cards, we've got Malleable Evocation, which is an attack 0, range 2, 1 XP. And then like Shaping the Ether, it also can do several other things based on what elements you can consume. However, its overall attack power isn't that great. So with fire, we can add +1 attack and wound. With ice, it's +1 attack and mobilize. Wind is a +1 attack target 2, and grass is +1 attack and poison. So if you can somehow get all of these elements activated and use them all at once, this would be an attack 4 at range 2, target 2, poison, wound, and immobilize. So that does sound really good. That is a lot of things, but it's going to be really hard to get this active and use it consistently. And there are better things we can be doing with our elements than trying to get everything on this card. Most of the time you're only going to have 1 or 2 of these, so it's only an attack 2 at range 2. So I really don't like that one overall. The bottom is a move 2, and then again you can consume elements to do a bunch of extra things. Add 3 move, jump, shield, heal. So it's got some versatility, but I still won't be using this one in the build. And then Brilliant Flash is a good little heal card with a heal 3, range 3, activates light. The bottom is a loot 1. There is a strategy where you will need to use this card so you can get that extra light, but we're not going to be using it in our level 1 build right now. And then finally, Encompassing Shadow. This is invisible, affect 1 ally within range 3, and then create dark. So this could be really good if you have a friend that needs to be invisible or that uses invisibility, like the Night Shroud. Plus it creates dark, which we can use. And then the bottom is a move 2, all attacks targeting you gain disadvantage. So this card and Brilliant Flash at level 1 and for the first few levels are both really situational. Like if you have a friend that really can make good use of this invisibility, then this isn't a bad idea to bring this one along, because you still get that element out of it to be able to use for something else later. And Brilliant Flash, same thing. If you don't have a good healer in the party or a lot of heals in the party, it's not a bad idea to bring this one along just for a little extra heal. However, if you do have someone that's playing more of a healer class or a couple people that have heals, then it won't really be necessarily bring this one along. So with that said, that is our level 1. So let's quickly talk about the level 1 kind of build and play up through our first rest. So I'll be popping the cards up here on screen so you can see them as I talk about them. So first off, we're going to use Lava Eruption and Infernal Vortex together. Now we're going to use the top of a Lava Eruption, which is our attack 1, targets all enemies within range 4, and we make fire and grass, gain an XP. Now this is a burn. Yes, we're starting off with a burn card. However, it's going to help us get through room 1 really fast with our team, so I think it's worth it here. And then we're going to use the bottom of Infernal Vortex to move 2 and create ice. So at the end of turn 1, we're going to have fire, grass, and ice. Then we're going to go into turn 2. When we get to turn 2, we're going to use Shaping the Ether and Stoking Hail. So Shaping the Ether, we've got fire, grass, and ice like we just talked about, which makes this an attack 3, range 3, stun, target 2. So we're going to hit 2 enemies, stunning them, hopefully doing some decent damage as well with those attack 3s. And then we're going to use our move 2 fire on the bottom of Stoking Hail to set up our next turn. So on turn 3, we've got Ice Spikes and Tremulent Cyclone. We're going to use the top of Ice Spikes because we activated that fire on the last turn. So now we can do attack 2 at range 3 in that 3 triangle pattern, and also wound. So this is actually really good, again, for just adding on some more damage so our enemies Hopefully there's a couple enemies together that we can at least hit 2 of them with this. If you can only hit one, you can only hit one. That's fine. It's going to happen. It's a reusable card, so it's not a big deal. And then we're going to use the bottom of the Cyclone card to go ahead and move 2 and activate Grass for our next turn. So then on turn 4, we have Formless Power and Raw Enhancement, where we're going to use Attack 2, Range 2 on Formless Power. We're going to consume that Grass to make it Attack 3, Range 3, and get 1 more Attack 3 at range off on an enemy, hopefully finishing one off. And then we're going to use the bottom of Raw Enhancement just for the move. There's no other way. We don't have anything left to buff this one up with unless our allies have made elements for us. So it's just going to be a move 3, but this is going to help us kind of stay up with the party. And by now, by turn 4, considering how we started out with our first 2 turns, we should be in pretty good shape now. And the first room should probably be pretty much cleared between us and the rest of our party. And this move 3 will help us get to the door to get ready for the next room. And then finally, on our last turn before our first rest, we're going to play Frigid Torrent and Pure Augmentation. And these are basically just the leftover cards. There's nothing special going on here. We're just going to probably attack 3 in melee if there's something we can finish off with that, and then use the bottom of Pure Augmentation for a move 3. Now, you could alternatively swap out these turns and use Frigid Torrent for turn 4 while you have that Grass to do the attack 3, target 2, pierce 2. If the situation calls for it, absolutely swap that out and do that instead for turn 4. But otherwise, this would be turn 5, and then it would be time for our first rest, where we're going to end up losing. Obviously, we don't have Lava Eruption anymore, and we're going to have to lose another card. So now it's time to start getting creative with the cards that we have to create the elements we need to still do something and be powerful. But hopefully this will give you an idea of kind of how to get started. So with that done, let's go ahead and move into level 2 and talk about the rest of our leveled cards here. So level 2 is going to find Boiling Arc and Crystallizing Blast. Now, Boiling Arc is your melee attack. It creates fire. It attacks for 2 in that kind of burst pattern out in front of you. And then the bottom is a move 4. If you consume fire, you retaliate 2 at range 2. Now, again, you don't want to be taking hits as the Elementalist. You don't have the health for it. So this retaliate, to me, any of these moves that retaliate, I don't like them for the Elementalist unless you're specifically playing to create shields and retaliate. But then I think you're missing a lot of other opportunity with the Elementalist. The other one is Crystallizing Blast. So this is the opposite side of that, where this one's only an attack 1, but it's range 3 in that huge pattern. It does create ice, which is great for us being able to use Stoking Hail for the stun. So I do like this one. The bottom's a move 4. We consume ice on that side to give ourselves 2 shield for the round, which could be good if we know we're going to take a hit. So we're going to take Crystallizing Blast here at level 2, and then we're going to take Frigid Torrent out to put that one in. Because we're, like I said, we're probably not using this one because it's a melee attack. So it makes sense to go ahead and trade that out to put Crystallizing Blast in. And then we'll go ahead and move on to level 3, where we got Burial and Chain Lightning. Now, Burial is an attack 4, range 4. If we consume Grass, it's +1 attack and immobilize with an experience point. And then if we have Dark to consume, it adds another +1 attack and Curse with 1 more experience point. It does the triangle pattern. It is a burn. However, this can be a really strong card. If you fully power this up, it is an attack 6 on 3 enemies, plus whatever your modifier is, plus immobilize and curse 3 enemies, 3 misses into their deck. That's really, really good. So this is a decent burn card if you can take full effect of it. I wouldn't use it if you're not getting a good effect, obviously. And then the bottom is a nice little range attack with attack 3, range 4, and it creates dark. So that's actually a decent attack. It creates dark for us to be able to use later. And then the other card is Chain Lightning. Now this one sounds really fun, really cool, and it is cool, but it does technically do less damage than Burial if you're able to take full advantage of Burial. Now if you're using against shielded enemies, it might be a little bit better, but Burial with, doing an attack 6 if it's fully powered up really punches through shields pretty well. But Chain Lightning is an attack X equals 4, so it's an attack 4 at range 3, but then you get to attack for 3 on a new enemy within range 2 of the first one, and then you get to attack for 2 on a third enemy within range 2 of that target. So it's attack 4, 3, and 2 on 3 different enemies, essentially, as long as they're all within range 2 of each other. And then if you have Light to consume, it actually makes it +1 on all those attacks with Pierce 2. So then it's 5, 4, and 3 with Pierce 2. So it could be really good for, again, taking out shielded enemies. And then if you consume Wind, it allows you to do an additional attack on a 4th enemy for, again, -1 more damage than the previous enemy before it. So this is a really fun card, and I wouldn't blame you for taking it over Burial, because it is fun to use, but it is technically a little less powerful than Burial can be. However, the bottom is also another heal 3 with range 4 and light. So again, situationally, if you need the heals, it might be good to take this one. Plus, it does, again, create an element for us. But earlier on, it's harder for us to use light and dark until we get another level or 2 in where we start finding some cards that actually use those, besides Burial, of course. So we're going to take Burial here at level 3, and then I'm going to take Pure Augmentation out. So moving on then to level 4, where we're going to find Primal Duality and Gravel Vortex. So Primal Duality is an attack 5, range 4, target 2, creates ice and fire, and gain 1 XP. It's a burn. However, this isn't bad. It's kind of later. We're getting at level 4 now, so 10 total damage on 2 enemies isn't necessarily the greatest, but the range makes it nice, and activating the 2 elements is really nice for us to be able to use something like Shaping the Ether afterwards to get the extra damage and stun off. And then the bottom, though, is really good with a move 2, creates dark and light, which we're going to need here in a little bit when we pick up another card. So Primal Duality will be the one that we take, mostly for the bottom, honestly, because we're going to need that 2 activated elements on our move. However, the other one is Gravel Vortex. With an attack 2, target all adjacent enemies, consume grass create grass and wind. Now, this is a melee attack, so again, not really great for the Elementalist in my opinion. The bottom is a loot 1, but if you can consume 2 elements, it's a loot 2 instead, which, if you need a bunch of money or trying to get items and stuff, then this could be good for that. But we're going to go ahead and pick up Primal Duality here, and then take out Raw Enhancement to put that one in. Okay, and then we're going to move on to level 5. We're at level 5, we're going to find Obsidian Shards and Winter's Edge. Now, these are both good cards, and we're going to actually end up taking both of them. But let's go ahead and talk about them here. So Obsidian Shards, attack 2, range 3, target 2. If we have grass and fire to consume, it actually makes it attack 5 on 2 targets, and it's not a burn this time. So that's actually really good. And then the bottom is a shield 1 self. You can create dark and ice. So both sides of this card really good for different reasons. And then Winter's Edge is an attack 5, range 2. However, if we have ice and wind to consume, it adds +2 to the range and pierce 4, which makes this an excellent card for killing shielded enemies on those maps that have a lot of them. That would make it attack 5, range 4, pierce 4. And then the bottom is a heal 2, range 2, makes fire and light. So we're going to take Winter's Edge first, especially for those maps where there's shielded enemies. Now we're going to take Shaping the Ether out to put Winter's Edge in. So that is really modifying our original strategy that we talked about. However, I think it's worth it if there's shielded enemies. Now, if there's not shielded enemies on the scenario, you may want to leave Shaping the Ether in and take Winter's Edge back out. So this is one of those situations where don't just put the card and leave it in there forever. You might want to swap it out depending on the scenario. This one specifically is good when fighting shielded enemies. So then we'll go ahead and move on to level 6, where we'll find Eye of the Hurricane and Simulacrum. So, Eye of the Hurricane, range 3, heal 4, attack 2, target all enemies with a range 2 of the healed character, and then you get to create ice and wind, gain 1 XP, it's a burn. And then the bottom is a move 3, if we consume fire, it's move 6, if we consume wind, it adds jump and an experience point. So, Eye of the Hurricane is really weak at this point. I mean, we're talking about level 6, an attack 2, yeah, all enemies within range 2 of the character, but it's also a burn. So an attack 2 on all enemies within range 2 for a burn, I just don't really see that being that good. And then, if you have to use this on an ally and doesn't even need the healing, then you get waste that half of it. So I really don't like this one for a level 6 card. Then Simulacrum here is an attack 2, range 3, but if you have a crap ton of elements, you can do a bunch of extra things to it. You can add +3 attack, you can add target 2, you can add Immobilize and Muddle. So this can be a versatile card, but again, having to consume 2 elements can make it kind of tricky, and there's other cards that use 2 elements that do better things than Simulacrum does. And then the bottom is your Summon Doppelganger. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad summons. It does have 10 health, it moves 2, but it doesn't attack. It is essentially a turret for you to use to do your attacks from. So you could sit in the back of a scenario, have your Doppelganger run up there with the rest of your party, and actually do all your attacks through your Doppelganger. However, you can't control where your doppelganger goes because he's always going to go to the closest enemy and stand next to them. So he's probably going to get himself killed. And also, you can't control where you need to go for those very specific abilities where you need to be within a certain range. So now I did play with this one when I played it, and I did find myself not using it as much as I thought. It wasn't as good as I thought it was. So this is actually where we're going to go back, and at level 6, we're going to take the other level 5 card, Obsidian Shards, for that extra attack power that we can get from that one. So we're going to take Obsidian Shards, and then we're going to take Formless Power out to put that one in. And then we'll go ahead and move on to level 7, where we're going to find Vengeance and Pragmatic Reinforcement. Now, these are, again, both good cards because you kind of need both of them for a specific strategy we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But Vengeance is an attack 2, range 3 in the triangle pattern. However, if you have Dark and any other element, you get to kill all normal targets inside that pattern as well. Rather than doing the actual damage, you just straight up kill them. So this can be super powerful, especially if you can get 3 normal enemies in here. That is a lot of damage and just deletes enemies. I really like this one, and this is why we picked up Primal Duality here to use the bottom. It's a move 2, it makes light and dark. On the next turn, we can do Vengeance because we have Dark and any other element. So that's kind of the pattern there, and that makes us really, really powerful. And then we can get this card back, hopefully before a rest, through a stamina potion or some other way, and be able to use it again. That makes it really, really good. So the bottom is also a move 3, retaliate 1, and you affect an adjacent ally. If you consume light in any other element, you add +2 to that. So you can give an ally retaliate 3, essentially, with the bottom of this. But I really like it for the top. And then Pragmatic Reinforcement, the top is a heal 3, range 3. And if you have different elements, you can do things. So ice is a shield, grass is a heal +2 more, and light allows the healed character to recover a discarded card. So this one I like, which we're going to end up picking up both of these because we're going to use Pragmatic Reinforcement to get Vengeance back. Because all we need to do is activate light, and this is where adding Brilliant Flash into our hand could help because we could create the light we need, and then we could use this with light to go ahead and get Vengeance back and also heal ourselves in the process. And then the bottom one of this one too is decent for an attack 3, range 3, and if we have Dark, it's +2 attack, wind is 3 more range, fire is poison and wound. So actually fully powered up, the bottom of this is actually really powerful too because it would be attack 5 with range 6, and you would poison and wound the target. So both of these are really good. We're going to take Vengeance first for that deleting of normal enemies. And then we're going to take Burial out to put Vengeance in because honestly, Vengeance is reusable. It's the same pattern and it kills them rather than just damaging them. Unless, of course, they're elites. So overall, though, it's better than Burial. And then we're going to go ahead and move on to level 8 where we're going to find Volatile Consumption and Elemental Aegis. So Volatile Consumption, this one sounds really cool, and I do like the idea of it, but there are technically better ways to use your cards than using this one. So the top, though, is a once per action. If you consume an element during the action, which you'll be doing almost every turn, you may cause an enemy within range 2 to suffer 1 damage, or you may perform a heal 1 range 2 action. This is an active card. It gains 2 XP, so during the whole scenario, you could always be doing 1 extra damage to enemies that are within range 2 of you, and it doesn't even have to be the same one you targeted. They just have to be within range 2, and you can make them suffer 1 damage. So that's really cool, but there are, technically better ways to power up attacks than using this by just using an extra element. And it is an or. It's an either or situation. So you can't make an enemy suffer damage and heal an ally. It's either or. And then the bottom of this one is a move 3 with jump, and then it's got a bunch of things you can do here with elements to add either +2 move and you wound all enemies move through, or +2 move and you immobilize all enemies through. So you could move 7 with jump with this card on the bottom if you had all the elements you needed, and then you would wound and immobilize everything you walked through. So that's actually, you think about it, that's not bad. That makes everything stuck in place. It gives them an extra damage for the round when their turn comes around. So not bad. And then we're going to move on to Elemental Aegis. This is a shield 2 on yourself, along with a crap ton more shield if you have elements, essentially. You can potentially have 6 shield out of this card, which, again, as an Elementalist, playing ranged, it's really not that useful. And then the bottom is a heal 5 self, creates light. So this is where we're going to go back and take Pragmatic Reinforcement instead of either of those 2 cards. That way we can get our Vengeance back through this card, and also probably through stamina potions, hopefully we can get to where we can use Vengeance at least twice, maybe 3 times during a rest cycle. So Ice Spikes is going to come out for us to put Pragmatic Reinforcement in, and then we're going to go ahead and move on to level 9 finally, where we're going to find Ethereal Manifestation and Eternal Equilibrium. So Ethereal Manifestation is Summon Mana Sphere. It has 3 health, it moves 3, it attacks for 2, creates an element every time it attacks, and it has range 3. So as summons go, this one's actually really, really good for the Elementalist because it's going to be another element getting created for you, and your summons technically goes on its own turn right before yours, meaning the element that it creates you can immediately use on your turn. So this is actually really, really powerful for giving you that flexibility you need. If you're short an element going into your turn, you can use the Mana Sphere's attack to give you that element. And then the bottom of this one, perform any of the following abilities. If you consume fire, you get to attack 3 at range 3. If you consume ice, it's a loot 1. If you consume grass, it's a heal 3, range 3. If you consume wind, it's a move 3. And I think you can mix and match these. It says perform any of the following. It doesn't say any one of the following. So I'm not sure if the digital version is going to let you do all of those, but I think if you're playing on the board game, I'd say you can do all those things if you have the elements. And then the last card is Eternal Equilibrium. It's attack 2, target all enemies within range 3. If you have dark and light, you can add +1 attack for each, plus curse for dark and muddle for light, an experience point for each one. So that becomes attack 4, curse, muddle, everything within range 3. Not bad, especially if you've powered up with a major power potion. It'd be like attack 6 on a whole room, essentially. It's actually not bad if it's fully powered up. And then heal 4, range 4 on the bottom. If you have fire, it adds retaliate 2. If you have ice, it adds shield 2. And that would be to the target, I believe, of the heal. So you could heal an ally, give them 2 shield, and give them 2 retaliate. That's actually really powerful if you put that on like your tank or something who needs some health. But we're going to take the Ethereal Manifestation here because I really like the Mana Sphere giving us that extra element, because the Elementalist, as the name suggests, needs elements to be truly effective. So as far as what to take out at this point, it's really up to you. Like, you know how you're playing at this point, what cards you're using, what order you're using them in. So just take out whatever you're using the least or seems to be less effective for you to put Ethereal Manifestation in. So let's talk about a couple combinations, which we kind of already touched on, Vengeance and Pragmatic Reinforcement. So we'll pop those cards up here and we'll talk about them. Vengeance, like we talked about, make sure you use the bottom of Primal Duality to get those 2 elements activated. On the next turn, use Vengeance and get normal enemies out of your way. Take them out. And then on the next turn, depending on what cards you have, maybe you have Winter's Edge, use the bottom of Winter's Edge to create light again. Then use Pragmatic Reinforcement on yourself to get your card back, your Vengeance card back. And then use Vengeance again after activating. You might have to wait another turn, obviously, to get the elements activated. Or you could even use a stamina potion to go ahead and just get Primal Duality back to do the exact same combo. Again, use Primal Duality, then on the next turn use Vengeance. Essentially, you could get this attack off at least twice during a rest cycle if you have a stamina potion and if you use Pragmatic Reinforcement, and potentially more. Maybe allies can give you cards back, or maybe you can figure out a way to finesse it to where you can have all the elements you need and still be able to use it 3 times. Use it as much as possible. Once you get Vengeance, that should be your main play. Just trying to delete all the normal enemies on the map and let your allies take care of the elites. So I really like that strategy. The other advice to have for level 9 and really the entire playthrough with an Elementalist on all levels is, as I said in the beginning, always plan 2 turns ahead, if not more. You need to know what elements are going to be active on the next turn so you can plan that next turn. So as the Elementalist, activate as many of the elements as you can that you know you need, and then you might have to occasionally rely on an ally or maybe use an item or something to create another element so that every turn you know what you're going to do and you know you're going to have the elements that you need. If you don't plan ahead as the Elementalist, you will probably not do much damage and you'll not find him very much fun. So with all the cards covered and the strategies talked about, let's go ahead and move into the items and talk about how we can make the Elementalist a little bit better with our items. So the first thing to come to is our head items, of course, and Eagle Eye Goggles I highly recommend especially for, we talked about Lava Eruption, using that in the beginning with like a power potion to do attack 2 or attack 3 if it's a major power potion. Eagle Eye Goggles will give you the advantage to make sure you don't miss on all of those enemies, and this can really help you wipe out a room. And this is also good for other attacks later on that are burns that target more than one. It's not a bad idea to have the Eagle Eye Goggles as long as they're available. The other good option is, of course, Empowering Talisman, because we can get consumed items back. This is great for getting mana potions back, stamina potions back. So either of those two items is a really good item in the beginning of the game as soon as you can get them. And then the armor items. Now, armor is a little different. Again, think utility when we're playing the Elementalist. We're not thinking defense, we're thinking utility. So Robes of Evocation, they could be good. Now, we have a card that does this where we can consume an element and add attack. However, we may not want to use that card because it is a burn, it's an active card, it's going to lessen our turns, and we don't want to necessarily use that every single turn. So the Robes of Evocation could be a good option just to be able to use that extra attack out of an extra element when we want to, rather than using a card that goes away for the scenario, that we can't get back essentially. So that's a good option. And then the other good option really is like Flea Bitten Shawl to make sure you're not targeted because you're going to be really low on your health points, or Cloak of Invisibility to make sure you just don't take attacks when you really need to not take attacks. And then moving on to hand items. So hand items, we're not going to focus on any weapons. Things that create elements are the only thing you really want as the Elementalist. So Staff of Elements is the best one because you can create any element you want and it comes back after you rest. So this is really, really awesome for getting you the elements that you need when you need them. The other option are all the other elemental creating staves. So the Wands of Darkness, Frost, Infernos, so forth and so on. Carry one of those with you so that you can make a specific element. If you find yourself using ice a lot, for instance, to do stuns, carry that ice staff with you. So you'll have both the Staff of Elements to create any element that you need, and then one of these to create the other element that you use a lot of. Or if you don't have the Staff of Elements, two of these. That way you can always create an extra element when you need it. And then for boots, I would suggest probably the Boots of Striding and their various upgrades, maybe jet boots or rocket boots for the extra jump that's involved with it. But you're going to need the extra movement because the Elementalist does not have a lot of move, as you've probably noticed, and you kind of have to keep moving up, and hopefully your team stays ahead of you so you're not getting targeted. But being able to use Boots of Striding or something like that to give you a nice boost on one turn and still be able to activate the element that's on the card, if it's one of those move to activate an element, is really good. So Boots of Striding and its various upgrades would be my top recommendation probably for boots. And then moving into our small items, all the potions are good here. Healing, if you need the healing, if you find yourself getting hit, it's not a bad idea, although you probably can use your own heal 3s to take care of that. So your minor and major versions of Stamina Potion, definitely really good for getting those cards back like we talked about to do those combos. Power Potions are really good for things like Lava Eruption, where we're going to hit a lot of targets with it. And then minor Mana Potions. Mana Potions are actually really good too because it gives us another way to create the elements we need when we need them. Or even better, get your allies to carry Mana Potions and they can make the elements you need before their turn is over. Just be like, hey, I'm going to need fire. Can you use your Mana Potion to make fire? And they'd be like, yeah, sure. So then they make fire. Then your turn comes. You have the fire you need. So even better than you using them would be getting your allies to carry them for you and use them. And then the last thing to suggest here would be like the Moon Earring to get your spent items back. We talked about using those wands to create elements. This is a good way to get those back without having to rest, to make those elements again, to really help us be as powerful as we can be with the Elementalist. So that takes care of items. Let's go ahead and move into perks. So perks are a little bit different here. We are going to go ahead and take care of our -1s like we always do. We're just going to get rid of 4 of our -1s. We can get rid of our last -1 by replacing it with a +1. And then at this point, we have some options. So we can take out another 0 to add in a +2 card. Or we could add in some of these cards that create elements for us. So it really depends on how it's going. Like if your allies are making enough elements, you're not having trouble with elements, go ahead and go with the numbers game here and add the +2s in. There's also a +1 wound card. You'd want to add that in to get the math in your favor over here. However, if you need the elements, it's not a bad idea to add in 3 zeros that all create fire for you, or ice, or wind, or grass. Or my personal favorites really are Magma and Blizzard here, because with these we can replace 2 of our nothing zeros with zeros that create an element for us. So if you find yourself really needing the extra elements, maybe go with these 2 here before you go with the +2s. But regardless of which way you went, so if we picked up our numbers game first, then after that we should go with probably this +0 stuns, because stuns are always good. And then let's go into getting our elements. And like I said, like Magma and Blizzard first. And then once those are done, we can go ahead and start adding in all of our other element adding cards here. And then we can do the add a target and the push rollers. So the one nice thing about the Elementalist 2 is that there are hardly any rolling cards. Your only rollers are the push cards. Everything else is a standard, just one and done card. So you don't have to worry about rolling into a miss or anything like that, which is nice. And with only 1/2, you're generally going to do some pretty good damage. Consistent damage. Not high damage necessarily, but you will do consistent damage because you should be getting either zeros or +1s, a couple +2s maybe, most of the time. Plus, these element activating cards are really handy when they come up. They do make your life a lot easier on the next turn because you can maybe change up what you were going to do because now, oh, I have all of these elements I need to do a specific thing where before I only had 2 of them. So having these extra element activators are also very, very nice. Okay, and with that will finish up the Elementalist and all his cards. So again, in review, the Elementalist, a very difficult class to play if you're not comfortable with planning ahead and using the elements that you have when you have them, making the ones that you know you're going to need. If you're not comfortable with that kind of play, if you'd rather kind of play like off the cuff and just like what's going on each turn, then you don't want the Elementalist. You will not like him. However, for those willing to take the challenge and kind of plan ahead, he can be a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun playing him when I played him. But there are definitely those times when you feel like you're useless and you can't do much because you're getting less cards, like it's later in a map and you're running out of cards. It's harder to set up those combos and have the elements that you need. But early on, he is a powerhouse. Come out of the gate running with him, do as much damage to as many enemies as possible in the beginning, and then let your team kind of finish up the scenario with you just doing what you can in the background. Now, I hope you like this video. If you want to continue watching the guide series, here is another one down here that you can continue watching. Remember to like, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. It's greatly appreciated. It really helps me out. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and keep on gaming.